Hey, everybody. We will get started in just a few minutes here. Probably give everyone, maybe another 2 or 3 minutes. So I guess while you are, for those of you that are here, if you want to drop in where you're from or, where you're calling in from in the chat, that'd be kind of cool. So I am calling in from San Francisco.
Hi Shane, good morning. Is it morning in
Hey,
San Francisco?
it is morning here. Yep, it's 9 a.m.
Okay, so good evening from France. It's 6 p.m. over there.
Well, good evening to you. Yeah, I know we have people calling in from all over.
Yeah.
So, good evening to many of you. Good, afternoon, good morning. New York City, all right, Paris, Boston. Okay, I used to live over near Boston at one point.
Hey Shane. They were on the kit version.
All right, we'll probably wait another, say 60 seconds, and then we'll slowly get this train running. Got Austin, Texas. I love Austin, Texas. Okay, that's really cool. I'd love to talk more about that, Graham. That's cool. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Hey, Sam, good to see you. I will share my screen and we'll get this thing going. I know we'll have a lot of people that kind of come in and come and go. That's pretty normal. Make sure it is recording. One time I forgot. It is, okay. So, this will be recorded. So if you do have to leave, you'll get an email. It usually comes out. It takes a few hours, it'll come out later today. But let me get my screen shared and we will kick this thing off. All right. Should all be able to see my screen, I hope. All good? Someone want to drop in the chat if it looks good, if you can see it? All right, Sam says it's good. We're going to say it's good. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit today about with the goal of build and deploy our first AI agent. So we're going to learn a little bit about, what AI agents are, learn a little bit about Mastra, and kind of talk through how you might actually build and deploy one. So we're going to talk through some common AI engineering concepts, and we're going to talk about how those kind of map to core Mastra primitives, agents, workflows, evals. And so who am I? So my name's Shane Thomas. I was, formerly engineering and product at Gatsby and Netlify. I built a website called AudioFeed a while back, a couple years ago now. And I spent 15 years in open source back, if you can believe it or not. I started in Drupal probably about 15 years ago. So I spent a lot of time in the Drupal community building Drupal modules and things like that for Drupal, which is all open source if you're familiar. And so I'm one of the founders and chief product officer at Mastra. And go ahead and connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we can chat there. So let's talk about what agents are, because you've probably been hearing a lot about it, depending on where you're at in your journey building AI applications. And there's a lot of hype around what is considered an agent and what's not. And there's not a clear one. This is the one definition, unfortunately. Marketing terms have kind of taken over, and now agents are everywhere. Everything's an agent. But the simplest way that we like to describe it is an agent, you could consider it software with non-deterministic code. So you kind of got to think about agents as a spectrum. There's things that are less agentic, and then there's things that there are more agentic. And so it's not necessarily is something an agent or not, it's how agentic is it. Something that's less agentic would be a mostly deterministic workflow with maybe a call or two out to an LLM. Maybe it's a simple trip planner. Go get the flights, go get the hotels, and then an LLM puts those together in a package. That is, maybe a single LLM call that kind of combines data from multiple places. It's not, like a fully autonomous agent, but it is kind of agentic. You can have something that's a little bit more agentic, which is you have LLMs that build and execute their own plans. So they kind of come up with their own plans and they execute that plan. An AI customer service assistant with knowledge to an access, or access to a knowledge base where you ask it a question, it can go out and look for information, it can respond to you. Other things that might fall in this category, if you've used services like Lovable or Bolt.new or V0, like they're a little bit more agentic, or Cursor or Windsurf, they kind of do these planning steps. And so that's kind of falls into more agentic spectrum. And then you have, kind of even the most agentic stuff, which is, a self-driving car. So if you've ever been to San Francisco or LA, you've maybe seen the self-driving Waymos. Those are much more agentic because they're much more hands-off with very little human input, although there is still some required sometimes. And let's talk about, a lot of people ask you, do you really need an AI application or an AI agent framework? And I just found this tweet kind of funny, it's saying like, frameworks are stupid. You just need an API key and a loop and a server and good API designs and a tool execution sandbox and a database and some middleware code and some file storage and, context management system. And then by the time you added all that stuff together, you've basically built a framework. And so, that's why we built Mastra. So Mastra is an open source AI agent framework for TypeScript. And what's included with Mastra, we have tools, tool calling, we have memory, we have tracing, we have state machine-based workflows. So you can do human in the loop, so you can suspend or resume and have, actions that a human can kind of come in and interrupt. And then we have, simple APIs for that. You can just do step, then, after, you don't need to learn, graph theory. We have evals, so you can track and measure AI output. Last week we had an evals workshop. We'll have an evals workshop again in the future. We have storage for RAG. We have a RAGs workshop next week. And then we have a local development playground, which you're going to get to see today. So really the goals of Mastra is to be opinionated, but also flexible, because we really don't want to lock you in. We want you to be able to really get further faster. But then, as you might need different things, you can pull those in and actually use those just alongside Mastra. So 8 minutes. I'm getting. I've done this workshop a few times. Every time I get faster going through those first few steps. Normally it takes about 10-ish minutes. So we're gonna have more time to play in code, which is good. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna start looking at some code. We're gonna create a new Mastra project. We're gonna create an agent that can tell us the weather. We'll create and run a simple eval just to show that, it's not that hard to run some off-the-shelf evals. We won't do a lot of custom eval metrics today. That's where that other workshop comes in. But at least you can see what an eval looks like and how it shows in Mastra's local dev. We'll talk about a workflow that can plan activities based on the weather. We'll look at how that works. And we'll create an agent that can answer questions about a personal finance transactions from a spreadsheet. And then we'll deploy and test our agent kind of in a production environment. Okay. So with that, give me a second and we will get started. And let me share this. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go to the Mastra website. I'm just going to copy this right from the website. That's how we're going to get started. I'm going to drop into the CLI here. Let me make this just a touch bigger. Can you all see that? Is that hopefully good? All right. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And this is just going to install. Let me just pull the chat up so I can see what's going on. It looks good. All right, this is going to run Mastra create. And we're just going to call this March 6th workshop. And this is going to take a little bit, but what it's doing is it's going out, it's installing Mastra, it's getting all the dependencies that are required. You know, Mastra is built on top of AI SDK, if you're familiar with that. So we do use that kind of under the hood for all the model routing. So if you've used that before, that'll all feel familiar. And it kind of has to go through this install process. So there, now it's installing Mastra Core, asks where we want to create the Mastra files. We'll just keep it in the default. We will just start by turning on agents and workflows so we can kind of show everything. We will add tools and we can select our default provider. I think I will use Anthropic. Why not? And I'll skip an API key. We will add an example because that's the code we'll look at first so we can get started. All right. So now we can CD into our March 6th workshop. And I'm going to go ahead and copy an environment file. Just that all it has is my environment variables in it. That way, you know, my API keys, you don't need to see those. So if we go ahead and we can immediately run npm run dev, this will run Mastra dev, which is our local playground. And the nice thing about this, if I can get it to pull up here, is I'm gonna actually just make this on a little bit bigger screen today. It allows you to immediately get feedback and see how to interact with your agents, your tools, and your workflows. So we're going to click around in Master Dev first, and then from there, we will eventually look at the code of how all this is running. So let's just click on our weather agent, and you can see it tells us, you know, we're a weather agent. You have accurate information to the weather. It's using Sonnet. It's using Anthropic. It has a tool called Get Weather. We could, you know, see what that does. But let's just ask it what capabilities it has. Okay, that's great. So let's say, what is the weather in Sioux Falls? That's where I'm from. Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the United States. So it's saying it's going to go out and get the weather. And this is going to make a call. So it's 5.4 Celsius. So it's cold, but not too cold today, actually, for this time of year. So it's actually, the weather is pretty nice. A little bit windy, but not too bad. So if we want to look, we can actually see what happened in this. So this is the nice thing about the Master Dev is you can see that in our traces, these streams, anytime I actually called out to this this agent, I can see this stream. And I can see every step that happened in the stream. So you can see there's this tool call here where, you know, first it's this stream text and it tells me get the weather for a location. We can see it's going to check the weather conditions in Sioux Falls. It made this tool call for from the weather agent, and then we can look down here and we should be able to see the actual results of this tool call. So you can see right here, it made this weather tool, and this is the tool result. And then the agent or the LLM took that and then synthesized this into a response. So you can kind of dive in and see every step of every step that this agent is making. So that's pretty cool. So we can immediately chat with this agent, test it. One other thing I'll just note is it's all available through an API too. So once you're running the dev server, you could hit this from any front end application and you could just call stream, call generate, and you'd be able to interact with it from another application, not just this playground. In tools, you can see that we have this weather agent tool. This is the weather tool that the actual agent can call. So we can test this in isolation. Let's just test Sioux Falls again and see how this works. You can see, I can just see that if I were the agent and I called this tool, this is the data I would get back. So it's a good way to test your tools in isolation before you hand them off to your agents. And then lastly, there's a workflow here. And let's look at what this workflow does. So you can see this workflow has 2 steps. And the first step, and this is kind of just breaking down the problem in a different way. So this is just an example, but this step will fetch the weather and then it will plan activities. So it'll, based on the weather and the location you provide, it'll plan activities for that location. So if I type in Sioux Falls, which we've already seen the weather, you'll see that it's running. And if I look, it's now gotten the weather and you can see to my CLI, it's outputting, it's starting to stream activities for, based on the weather and the location. So it's talking about the Big Sioux Bike Trail, which is in Sioux Falls, Downtown Sculpture Walk, Old Courthouse Museum, all those are things in Sioux Falls, but it basically plans out a mock example of what I should do based on the weather. Okay, so now that that's running, looks like it's, you can see if I come back here, I can actually see the output, which is great. So I can actually see the output of this weather and all the plan that it made. So let's actually take a look at the code here. So we've seen all the UI stuff. We know it kind of works. Let's look at the code. So I'm using Windsurf. Some of you have probably used Cursor or maybe Windsurf. So I'm also going to, if you've heard the term vibe coding, which has been very popularized lately, we'll do some vibe coding together and see how Windsurf or Cursor actually do writing code for us during this workshop. So we can see how that goes. I'll try to make this just a touch bigger. Hopefully you all can see that. And let's take a look at what is in this Mastra folder. So again, remember when we started, it asked us to specify where we want to install Mastra. We said the source folder. So there's this Mastra directory. We have agents, tools, and workflows. Well, the nice thing is that kind of maps pretty closely to what we saw in the UI. So it's very clear what's in each of these folders. So let's start by looking at our agent. And you can see that this agent is pretty simple. We have a weather agent. Here were the instructions we saw in the playground. You can see we're just using AI SDK, using the Anthropic model, and we're using Claude Sonnet 3.5, and we're passing in this tool. Let's go ahead and look at what that tool does. And this tool is, these are just some types, so we'll kind of just skip over that. And you can see the tool has an input schema, which is the location. We entered Sioux Falls in this case, and then an output schema, which is what it's going to return. And then it's just a function. So all the tool is a function call. And it's not that the LLM is actually running this code. The LLM just tells us, hey, you should call this code on your system and then give me the results, and then I will process that. So the way that this interchange works is I request weather for Sioux Falls. The LLM says, okay, I'll get the weather, but I need you to run this tool for me. It comes back to, our local system and says, run this function. It runs the function, and then it passes that back to the LLM to then kind of synthesize a response for us based on the data that we pass back, which is, of course, in this output schema. And all it is calling out to 2 APIs. First, it gets basically a geocoding the location, and then it goes out to this weather API, and it returns it in this format. So as you can see, it's all just pretty much a simple function call here to get the weather. Now, last, let's look at this workflow. And this kind of does this in line. We could really actually move this into the agents folder, but the thing I want to show is just how simple it is if you go down here, the weather workflow is a new workflow. The trigger schema is a city, and its first step, fetch weather, then plan activities. And those are just, plan activities calls out to an agent that does the planning, and fetch weather just makes that tool call that we showed before to get the weather. So it's just another way to structure a kind of agentic workflows. What we see a lot of people do is you often start trying to just give your agent a bunch of tools, but sometimes that breaks down, and it usually gets better results if you can move things into a more deterministic workflow, and you can kind of guide the path. So if there's defined steps, we usually recommend to try to put it into a workflow, because you're going to get a better results because it's going to follow an execution path. But if it's less defined and you need the agent to just completely make decisions, then you can use an agent with tools. So you kind of have a lot of Lego blocks, we like to say, that you can kind of piece these things together, because agents can call workflows, workflows can call out to agents. You can really define these very complex multi-agent type systems with these just few small primitives that are set up. And last, in the kind of the root of this Mastra folder is where we pull it all together. So we just export this Mastra class, and we give it the workflows we want, we give it the agents we have, and we can set up different loggers. And there's a whole bunch of other things you can add in here. That's all in the documentation. But the nice thing about this, and someone mentioned, I think I saw, can you use this in Next.js? Yes, we're not going to go through that today. But the nice thing about this is, with this class, you can just now import this master class anywhere kind of inside your server components. It has to be server side, but you can import that, and you can call get agent, you can call agent.generate, agent.stream, and you can go ahead and just use all these things from Mastra within, whether it's Next.js or whatever, any kind of TypeScript node project. Again, needs to run on the server, but it's really easy to just import this Mastra and use it. So I see a question. Looks like Sam's maybe going to answer that. Otherwise, we can answer it at the end on logs. Okay. So now that we kind of looked through that code, let's actually write some stuff. So let's expand the capabilities a little bit more. And we will have time at the end for questions. So Sam's answering a lot as we go, and any ones that are a little bit longer, more involved, we'll spend like 10 minutes at the end, 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully having time for questions. So I created this really simple fake transactions list. You could imagine this as some kind of financial API or some kind of spreadsheet that you want to keep up to date. But I want to get my agent to be able to talk to this, so I can ask it questions about my transaction history. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to publish this thing. Normally you'd want to deal with auth and all that, but I don't really want to have to care about. We've all dealt with auth before. We know it's not fun. I'm just going to bypass that part and publish it to the web. So I'm gonna stop publishing and then republish this thing just to make sure. I think it's the same. Oh yeah, it's just the same. Okay, so we will just publish this. And you can see this is a pretty contrived example, right? But the nice thing is it's really the aha moment for me, at least, and I think for a lot of people that I've talked to, is when you can see an LLM interacting with your data. That's kind of the really cool part. And so I'm just going to publish this, and it's going to give me, a URL here that I can get. And I'm going to give this, I'm basically going to ask have a tool call that can go out and get this data. And then I'm going to pass that tool into the agent, and we're going to talk to it and see what it can do. So let's go into Windsurf, and we're going to try this. And our results may vary. We don't know how this is going to work, but let's go ahead and just say, I want to create another tool that can get transactions from a CSV. It should fetch the transactions from this URL. let's return the results as a CSV string as the output schema. Okay, let's see if there's any. I think that's all we really need. Let's see if there's any. Let's just let it run and see what happens. I'm just going to give it a little bit more direction. Use the get weather tool as an example. So of course, this is a pretty simple example, but if you haven't used tools like this, it's kind of cool that in a lot of ways, the way that I write code and the way that a lot of people on our team write code has changed a lot. Instead of you actually writing all the code yourself, a lot of times it's like you're working with a partner in this. Now, if you've ever used these, you also know that it often goes off the rails and it doesn't always get it right. But we're going to go ahead and just accept this and we'll kind of take a look. So it says it creates a transactions tool. Great. It's called get transactions. CSV string containing transactions, get transactions from a CSV. The one thing I will caution you all when you start working with agents and tools, this tool description is very important because that is the information that gets passed to the LLM. And you got to kind of think about it if you were a human and if you gave these tools to some, relatively, fairly smart person, but maybe not, very smart, and could they decide when to call this tool based on the description you give it. So I'm going to add to this description, get personal finance transactions from a CSV, just to give it a little bit more clarity. But you'll probably end up spending, if you've ever spent a lot of time writing prompts, you'll probably end up spending a lot of time writing tool calls when you start to work with agents, as far as like what the description should be, because you should be very descriptive. You might even put examples of when to call this in here. This is a pretty simple example, so I think it's going to work. But if it doesn't, we'll come back and we'll improve this description. And you can see all this is doing is calling get transactions. Input schema is an empty object. Output schema is just a string. It's calling out to this URL, just fetching it, and it's just returning it. So that's a pretty simple example. If we should be able to test this in isolation, I hope. That's kind of one of the points of Mastra Playground. I do need to see here. Oh, I am not running it anymore. Need to run it. npm run dev. Now let's check this. Okay, it's not showing up because I'm not exporting it. Let's go ahead and just, whoops, give it to our agent. So we'll just actually pull it into our agent here. Transaction tool, and we'll give it to our agent so then it will show up. And it's not typically, the one thing I will say is it's no longer just a weather agent, but we can test this transaction tool in isolation. You can see it pulls in all the data. So this has all the data from this spreadsheet. So that's great. And now I could ask this thing to get transactions. Let's actually try it. I don't think this is going to work, but what did I spend at Amazon? It's actually, yeah, normally I'd only show the happy path, but let's show the not. There we go. This is what I was hoping to see. It's saying I'm a weather assistant. So it does have the tool to get transactions. But if you look, it says I'm this helpful weather assistant that provides accurate weather information. Oops, I didn't want to click on that. So that makes sense. It's not trying to, even though I did give it this tool, I need to update the instructions to tell it when it can use this tool. So in Mastra Dev, we do have this kind of instruction tuning prompt enhancer that will help you write prompts, because one of the things we've realized, and maybe you've realized it, writing prompts is kind of hard. It's kind of like a black box. You don't know what always works or what's best. So we use the LLM to help it basically improve itself. So let's go ahead and ask it to improve itself. You are now a general purpose assistant that can fetch weather and help with personal finance questions. Let's just see what this does. And if it doesn't work, again, we can write this ourselves, but we have the tools. Let's see if we can use them. And usually it gives us a better result this way. All right, so now it says you're a versatile digital assistant specializing in weather information and personal finance guidance. Your core capabilities are weather services, personal finance support, and it has a whole bunch of information. We would, of course, I'd recommend you read all this stuff, but for the sake of time and, moving forward, we'll just click save, and I can click play here, and now I can set that this is the active version. Now let's try, how much did I spend at Amazon? All right, so it says based on the transaction data, I spent $45.99 at Amazon. This was paid using a credit card. If I look here, hopefully that's right. I did $45.99 at Amazon. So it's using my data, it's analyzing it, it's helping me out. And we could say, how much did I spend on my PayPal account? So we used it for Netflix, we used it for Spotify, so $26.98. And let's just take a look at that. Netflix, Spotify. Cool. So as you can see, it was very easy to create this agent that can then interact with data in the real world. One thing I will have to do here is I will have to copy this in. So we don't automatically save this to your code. This is a playground, so you can play around with your instructions. I actually want this. This is way better. I got better results. So I'm going to go back into my code. If I can click on the right link, and I'm just going to drop this in. I did not click copy correctly. Let's try this again. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. That's why. All right, I will copy this in here. You can see the system prompt is significantly larger now. And again, I would probably never written this level of detail, but when you start to give LLMs a higher level of detail like this, you're going to get more accurate results. And so that's why it's often nice to end up using an LLM to help you improve the prompts that you send that LLM. So it's almost like it knows how to talk to itself in a way it's going to understand. And it's not always the case, but it is often the case. So I would recommend trying that out. All right, so let's go ahead and try to add a simple eval to this so we can actually see how evals work. So let's go to the Mastra docs here. 1 second. I'll just go to Mastra docs here and we'll look at evals. And just for a quick overview of evals, if you haven't heard of evals, the way to think about evals is it's just like software tests. One of the biggest difference with evals is it's kind of like testing a non-deterministic system. It's usually, if you have the same inputs, you can get the same outputs in most systems, right? But with LLM calls, it's a little more unpredictable. So evals are a way to measure that. And so rather than necessarily just a pass or fail, often in evals, you'll have some kind of grade or a score. And over time, you want to track that your system is not degrading. It's actually either getting better, or at least you hold a certain quality line. But there's a lot of things you can eval. You can eval, and we'll look through some of the ones that kind of come off kind of off the shelf, we like to call it. You can measure if the LLM's hallucinating. You can measure if they're providing a complete answer. You can measure if it's relevant. You can measure for bias. You can measure for prompt alignment. I'm going to just use a really simple one. So I would say most good evals, you're going to use an LLM as the judge of these. So there's a couple ways you can think of an eval. Someone has to score the results of the LLM. Oftentimes in the early days, you're just testing it yourself. So you, the human, are deciding, when I look back at this response, I guess I don't no longer have it, but and we'll fix that in a second. But if I look back at the response, did I get the right answer? Was it complete? Do I think it is good enough? So you'd have a human judge that, but you can also use an LLM as the judge to decide if the response is good enough. So you can actually use the LLM after the call happens to judge if it was a good response, give it a grade, and then over time you can see how that's working. So we're going to go ahead and just use a very simple eval here. We can use tone consistencies, maybe a good one. Prompt alignment. Yeah, we'll use tone consistency just because that's simple. And we'll also add memory, because memory is another thing that your agents have. So we'll do that first, and then we'll add this eval. So we're going to need to install some things. So npm install at Mastra /evals. And if we look at the docs here you can also see we have docs on memory. So you can see how this works. And it's pretty easy to pass in thread IDs and resource IDs for memory. So I can just add here. And I'm going to need to install memory. Leave. Okay, so I installed memory, installed evals. That's not right. I think it's like that. So we're importing memory, and memory equals new memory, I think is how this works. Maybe I'm not doing that right. It's like that. Okay. Syntax. All right, so if I save that, let's see if memory's working, and then if memory's working, we'll go ahead and add that eval we were just talking about. So we can test this in the playground, of course. I need to run the dev server, npm run dev. Let's go ahead and do this. You can see now I have chat history. So if I say, what is the weather in Austin? Since I know someone was calling in from Austin. And then if I were to, you can see now I have the chat history. So with one line, we now have added memory to our agent. Let's now add this simple eval that we're going to do for tone consistency, just to show how easy it is to start to measure that. Let's see, we want new tone consistency metric. Let's grab that. And we just need to call our evals. Tone, and it's new tone consistency metric. Okay, and we can of course pass a bunch of evals in here. I would say these off-the-shelf evals are nice for certain things, but you really want to spend time writing your own evals. That's what we have a workshop for, because the evals should tie closely to your business results. And this one, what is tone consistency metric? It might be useful for us, it might not. But in this case, we're just going to show it as an example. But I would really recommend spending a little time. I think evals are underrated. You should be spending time with evals. So if we go here, let's just start a new chat and say, how much did I spend at the Apple Store? All right, I got out of there spending quite a bit of money, unfortunately. But let's look at the evals here. And you can see I now have this tone consistency metric. It gave me a score, 0.96. I can click in and it can see the input and the output. If you did have an LLM as a judge, it would give you a reason for why it gave it a score. So you could go ahead and see how why it's scoring it a certain way, and you can, of course, then measure that over time. So that's evals. Let's go ahead and deploy this thing. So we can actually get this thing live. All right, so we're just gonna do a get init. And I'm just gonna go create a new GitHub repo here. We'll call this March 6th workshop. We'll make it public so anyone who wants to see this afterwards can see it. And we will go ahead and push that up. And now we're going to go to Mastra Cloud, which if you want early access to Mastra Cloud, you go to the Mastra website and click on request access. I already have access, so I'm gonna log into Mastra Cloud. And we'll just go ahead and create this. And we're just showing deploying this to Mastra Cloud. Maybe I'm not logged in. Oh, there we go. So we're just going to show this deploying to Mastra Cloud. You can deploy this stuff to Cloudflare, Netlify, Vercel. It runs in all those different service providers. So we have docs for different deployers. You don't need to you can kind of basically deploy it, as we mentioned before, alongside your app if you already have an existing app, or as a standalone service, which is often useful if you want to kind of separate your AI logic from your actual front-end app. So this is the workshop. I'm going to need to get this Anthropic key, which I will do here in a different screen. So it's just Anthropic API key. And we're going to deploy it. And this is going to run. This will take like 2 or 3 minutes. So I'll finish up my slides, then we'll come back and we'll hopefully do a test that this thing is live on the internet. So as you can see, it's deploying. We can see the deployment logs. It's going to start streaming in here. But while that's building, let's go ahead and go through the last few slides. We'll give this thing about 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and hopefully do a quick test. Okay, so what's next? Memory. We did show memory real quick, but there's a lot more you can do with memory rather than just turning it on by default. There's a lot of dials you can turn in order to tune how memories get stored. You kind of, if you think about yourself, you have short and you have long-term memory. You can architect a system like that, and we give you a lot of those, like I said, those dials to turn to kind of configure how you want memory management to work for your agents. We didn't show human-in-the-loop workflows. We didn't show, we showed how to write your own tools, but there's other, you might have heard of MCP. We're going to have a workshop on that in a couple weeks. We've talked about, or we didn't talk about, but Composio is another option for being able to add tools to your agents really quickly to integrate with other services. We didn't talk about RAG, which is something we're going to have a workshop on next week. That's how you can get, if you have a large amount of data, how you can kind of feed that data into the context window of your LLM, of the agent. It's all about like context management. That's really what working with agents is deciding what information gets into the context window. You have custom eval metrics, which I mentioned before, we've had a workshop on, but that's where you should spend a lot of time if you are getting close to productionizing a system, writing some custom evals. So we have some examples out there. We have a notebook LM clone. We have a travel agent. We have a few others that we'll be releasing here soon. If you follow us on social media, you've probably seen some that we've been talking about. I should probably update this slide because I think we have a couple more we can add now. We didn't deploy a front end, right? We just were looking at the Mastra dev server. So we often recommend using Assistant UI, which is a really easy way. I think it's all built on Next. You can basically just replace, if you use this example here, you can replace this with the URL to your backend, and you could now have a front end that interacts with your with your Mastra agents. And lastly, there's some links to Mastra, the website. Join us in Discord if you do have questions. Let's see if this thing is live quick, and then we'll come back to this. All right, so let's go and see. It's still deploying. Oh, it's success. Okay. So if we look here, we should see our agents here. We have our agent, great. And this, you can notice this looks a lot like dev, right? It's very similar in that we can see this agent, we can see our workflows, it all shows up. We can also then access these agents through an API. So in this case, we have our weather agent. So let me go ahead and pull up Postman here, and let's see if we can test this out. All right, so let's pull up Postman, and what was our URL? Let's see what that is. Oops. Let's grab this. This nicely worded, nice name, Brown Blue School, I guess is our URL. All right. And if you looked at the API path, it was API agents, the actual slug for our agent, and then we can call generate or stream. In this case, I'm going to pass in a message. What's the weather in Sioux Falls? I already know what the weather is in Sioux Falls. Let's see what it is outside. I haven't been outside yet today. San Francisco. Let's run this. The current weather in San Francisco is 11.4, 52 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so it worked. So that actually came out to Master Cloud, and hopefully if I go into here, I should be able to see this trace and see everything coming in. So I see this generate call. I can see what is the weather in San Francisco, and of course I can see the results. So there we go. Instantly deployed agent, or almost instant. All right, let's go ahead and finish this up. So connect with me on Twitter if you haven't already. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do start building stuff with Mastra, please come to the Discord. We have a pretty good community that helps each other out. A lot of people from the team are there. And last, if I can ask you to do something right now, if you haven't already, if you could please star us on GitHub. That helps more people find Mastra. And if you want access to what I showed you with Mastra Cloud, you want to play around with it, join our beta. We're slowly rolling out access to people. So you'll kind of get on the wait list if you sign up using that link, and you'll get access very soon. And with that, we have about 10 to 12 minutes for some questions. So I will stop sharing and we can start answering some questions. Thanks, everybody. I don't know, Sam or Abby, if you're around, if you have curated any questions yet. Otherwise, I'll go through the chat.
I've answered a lot of them, but this one's really nice. From Marvin. Do you allow like LangGraph to pay for a license to host it on our own servers? We have clients in space tech and defense who do only on-prem for data security. I really like this question because there's a little history to this question. We got this question a lot when we built Gatsby Cloud, and the answer was always no. And that's because we didn't design our software to be portable to on-prem or on-prem cloud. Let's just say that we have already thought this way. The problem though, and this is for anybody who has this type of request, the juice isn't worth the squeeze yet. So if you're really serious about doing that, talk to us, but we're not going to go out of our way to do it, but we can do it. So,
yeah.
not
We
the
will
best
eventually
answer, but honest
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, we will eventually do that, Marvin. It's not today, but very soon. The one thing though is the actual Mastra framework is open source, so you can of course use that and host that anywhere. But if you want like cloud, if you wanted Mastra Cloud to be portable and hosted, then you could, we could talk about that, but we don't support it quite yet. But that's a good question. Okay. Any other questions? How long have you been building this? That's a good question.
Renato, I would like to know if the endpoints are accessible for a front-end service and what the response patterns are. Is there any documentation covering this, including input and output? This is particularly important since there are stream generate functionalities. The answer is everything's in our docs in terms of how everything works. And they're decent, but they can always be better. So if you find anything, Discord, just ping us. We're very active there.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is a lot of the questions people ask today, we're actively working on because we listen to people in Discord and you all are like the people in Discord. So in terms of patterns with front-end services, we're doing so much work this week on Next.js, kind of showing how you use Mastra and all that. So there'll be more information. Discord gets the information before these workshops. The next question in the same question is the status of what the agent is doing is important. Is there a way to retrieve it directly? I did answer this question already, but I'll answer it again. We're going to improve this because, every agent call is like, and you can see the trace, right? There's a lot of stuff happening. They're considered like these runs, and you should be able to observe them. By default, today, you can use these parameters called like on step finish, on finish callbacks. These are callbacks, though, that happen after things have happened in your agent, right? You kind of want the whole life cycle. So the answer is not today, but it's top of mind. Yeah, so that's that.
Yeah, just to one answer the previous question a little bit more. We do have a client SDK. So if you want to use this client on the front end, so you mentioned, yeah, is there a pattern of how you actually can use it from the front end to get the data? Here's basically how you can call agent.generate, agent.stream from your front end using this Mastra client. So that kind of goes back to that question. I did see another question in here. Can I replace LangChain with Mastra, Abby? I want to
Duh.
build AI agents and multi-agent workflows,
Yes.
PS and JavaScript. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Please
do like,
do.
yeah, we do see this as, in a lot of cases, a replacement for LangChain / LangGraph, but TypeScript first, TypeScript only. So if you're more familiar with JavaScript, we've focused on just doing JavaScript and TypeScript really well. Does Master Cloud support multi-agent workflow orchestration? Oliver, yes, it does. You can wire up multi-agent workflows. You can have agents that call other agents as tool calls. So there's many ways you can architect this. We have some examples in the examples part of our docs where you can see how to wire up multiple agents together. Anything that you can do on your local dev, you can do in cloud. So you can do it locally, you can see it all running, you can deploy it anywhere, you can deploy it to cloud and it will run. Do we get the ability to know the cost of an agent run, Leonardo? The answer is we will have that very soon in cloud. So the answer is yes, but not quite yet, but probably in the next week or two. And there's a workshop. Is there a workshop for integrating Mastra with Next.js? That's actually a good idea. So we might add that to the list. We're always looking for ideas like that for what you all want to learn. So if you do have ideas, you can respond to the email you get later. You can let us know in Discord. You can find us on on Twitter or whatever. Um, Ron has a good question here. Abby, if you host Mastra in an API on, say, a Next.js app on Vercel, what do you need to do to protect the endpoint that might be specific to Mastra?
So the answer is not necessarily nothing. It's what you would do normally for a Next.js API route, if that's what you're doing. Just what we use at Mastra to build Mastra is this company called Oso. It's a permissioning thing. I think it's very good, and I kind of want to make an example for how to use it with your Mastra endpoints, but it's open source. You guys should take a look. if you're looking into something very simple to do that type of stuff. Otherwise, it's whatever you were doing before. Just do it, keep doing it. Yes, you can deploy. Oh, sorry. The next question, shall we deploy Mastra agents in our own AWS? One of our guys, Ujon's working on how to do like EC2 deploys, etc. So there'll be docs here. So yeah, you can read those and do your thing. I just wouldn't do it personally, but if you have your own AWS setup and you're not in the ability to move, do your thing. And yeah,
Yeah, it'll work.
it'll work.
There are some things you start to running long running workloads at scale starts to get challenging, but it's totally possible to do it all yourself.
Yeah. We want everything to be self-hosted, but the word self there is very bold, right? I just
Yeah,
want everyone to know that the self
yeah.
there is very bold.
Especially when you start to throw real traffic at it, because agents are unlike normal web requests, right? Where a web request is always going to finish in a few seconds typically, right? An agent is often a longer running web request, right? There could be, and depending on the decisions and the tools it makes, it could be a potentially really long running web request. So there are some complexity when you're trying to kind of run this stuff on your own, but it's totally possible to do. I'd love it to replace trigger.dev when deploying AI workflows to serverless. Yeah, that should be possible as well, Wilson. A lot of yeah, I know that a lot of times you run into use trigger.dev and other ingest is another one that we've used to kind of get around function timeouts. You don't have to worry about that on Master Cloud, but other places you could still, I guess, could you deploy this to trigger.dev or something, Abby?
Yeah, you could, but that's like in
Yeah.
the self category.
Yeah, you could definitely do it, but
Yeah, this is just JavaScript at the end of the day. You can do whatever you want, you
yeah.
know? Okay, how are you guys doing long running tasks? If you look at Vercel's Fluid, we built that as well. But we didn't call it Fluid or make a big blog post about it. So that's how it works. How tight are integrations into Cloudflare dev products? We deploy to Cloudflare workers. Once again, that's a self kind of thing because bundle sizes are what you make it. And then getting Wrangler to build is what you make of it, like what's in your code base. But we're happy to help if you go to Discord and you have problems.
Mohammed has a question. Yes, we did answer this already, but maybe you joined late. You can integrate Mastra into an existing Next.js project. We're going to have an example coming out really soon. Someone asked if we could do a workshop on that in the future. But yes, you can run Mastra inside Next.js and have it, inside your server functions or your server API routes. You can just import the Mastra class, get your agents, have it provide tools that access the database or whatever. So totally possible. I'll keep an eye out for that guide that should be coming out here within the next few days. Looking forward to the MCP workshop. Yeah, the MCP is getting a lot of buzz right now. So we've been supporting MCP before MCP was even cool. So we were kind of early on the MCP train, and we're kind of excited that now everyone else is starting to come around to it because there needs to be a way to give agents tools really easily, and MCP is at least more of an open protocol for that. So it's not perfect by any means in my opinion, but it's something, and it is a nice protocol for at least the direction of where we need to go, where we can give more tools more rapidly, more easily to agents.
I have this one. Can I build a desktop agent which can access any website or app or website, the machine that's on the machine, and etc. I actually built one of these myself with Mastra. Yeah, you can, and with MCP, with MCP locally, right? Because it's a desktop agent, it's like all local, quote unquote local. There are so many MCP servers you can use to do file system, and a lot of Python tools that exist in MCP land that you don't necessarily have to worry about like writing yourself. So yeah, go try it out and have fun. Next question here is a really good one. The framework version in terms of Semver is currently a pre-release. Does this mean that backwards compatibility is not a priority in future versions? Or are you planning to keep things backwards compatible? I'm asking this as LangChain docs and examples kept on going out of sync and they really did not care about it and it sucks, essentially. Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, we screwed over some early users by not being thorough and really like just not giving a shit about this. And we broke our cloud product that was in alpha at the time. We broke everything. And no one actually saw it because it was before we blew up on Hacker News, right? We just freaking blew up after this event. And we talked to each other and we were like, we can't be like LangChain. So we are doing deprecation warnings. We're taking the time now. If we're going to deprecate something, like we're going to put it in your face. And the docs are going to be updated. Docs are a product of this business. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. I can't promise we'll never break anything, but we're going to be very diligent about deprecation warnings. And we learned this like when we were doing Gatsby too, right? We got to be, it means it does take more time to sometimes get, it's like a two-step process because you got to deprecate it for a while and then remove it. But that's the path that we want to take just because we know, especially when you build something, you often don't, if you build something, you might let it sit for a little while and then you come back and you don't want to do an upgrade and then have all the APIs break and have to then go back to the docs and spend hours or days rebuilding things that were working. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Yeah, if you do have any questions, please reach out, join the Discord, hopefully sign up for the cloud beta, and we will see you all, I'm sure, another time. Thanks.
Thank you. Peace.